Hello students. I know this last exam that you took is a tough one. I want to assure you that I'm going to take some steps to make that a little more manageable for you. The way I'm going to do that in the future, and I do this in my financial accounting course, online course, is I split the exam up into two pieces. So I'm going to do that going forward. I'll make sure and remind you all that there are going to be two separate pieces to your exam going forward. So you'll have a multiple choice section which you will only be allowed to take once. And then there will be the problem section where I'll allow you to take that twice. So obviously being able to take that twice and learn from a few of your working through the problems will give you some help on that. And also being able to take that into two separate pieces so you're not sitting at your computer working on your exam. For some students took the entire 2.5 hours, which is definitely too long. So I am taking steps to correct that for you, so I hope you find that helpful. As we move into the next chapter, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to find this chapter fairly straightforward and easy to follow. I also think it's a pretty interesting chapter with a lot of very practical applications. For this chapter, again, there's good videos that you can utilize in the required media component that you have. What I want to do is just go through a few of the problems in the PowerPoint. They do a really good job in the PowerPoint of incorporating problems from your textbook that you can follow along in your textbook or from the PowerPoint. So I'm going to take just a few of those and go through those with you in this video for those that find that helpful. In the first objective here, we are looking at cost, volume, profit analysis for this chapter. And your first learning objective is to calculate the unit contribution margin and the contribution margin ratio. I'm not going to go through all the details. You can obviously read this on your own, all the assumptions and things like that. What I want to do is move on to the problem itself, which is S7-1. It's Crystal Cruise Line data set. You can read this material here on your own. I'll give you a second to do that. Okay, so they give you all the necessary information that you need in order to calculate the contribution margin per ratio, per passenger, getting ahead of myself, calculate the contribution margin ratio, and given certain information such as passengers or total revenues, then to use that to project your operating income. So let's look at the first one, contribution margin per passenger. We know our sales revenue for one passenger is 50. We know our variable expenses, very easy to calculate our contribution margin. And contribution margin, again, what is left over after deducting our variable expenses to cover our fixed expenses and to make a profit. Okay, so calculating the contribution margin ratio, which we can also utilize to help us determine what's left over to cover those items I just mentioned, your fixed costs, and to make a profit. Take our unit contribution margin, $30, and divide it by sales price per unit. We get a 60% margin ratio, contribution margin ratio. We can also do this at a higher level. We can take our total contribution margin divided by our total sales and get that same number there. Okay, now the second two pieces of this is given the information that we have and using our contribution margin, how can we project operating income if our total sales is 11,000 passenger? Okay, so we have 11,000. We know our contribution margin is $30 per passenger. Multiply that and we get 330,000. Subtract our fixed costs. Okay, remember, contribution margin is what is left over to cover fixed costs and make an income, operating income. Okay, so if we deduct our fixed costs, then we have 120,000 left over in operating income. And then finally, if we know our total revenues are 490, that's we can calculate our contribution margin by simply using our contribution margin ratio that we calculated in B above to get our contribution margin. Again, subtract our fixed costs and we get our operating income. Okay, so that covers the first problem that I wanted to review with you. Second problem, S7-2. In this one, given the same information that we had above, now we're going to use this information, and what if we sell an additional 600 tickets? By what amount will our operating income increase or decrease? Well, we can just use this information and calculate that because we have our contribution margin information. By taking just the tickets, multiplying that by the $30, what amount will our contribution margin then add to our operating income? Well, the entire amount of $18,000, because we know we have already covered our fixed costs. So any additional ticket sales is going to contribute directly to our operating profit. Okay, objective 2 is using CVP analysis to find break-even points and to find target profit volumes. The break-even analysis has a lot of use in the real world of business. You may have covered this in other topics in accounting. I know we covered the break-even point in our in my business math class, for those of you that have had that class, Accounting 158. Very topical and application of that. Okay, so let's go back here, and I want to again just bring up the problem, and we're moving right into S7-3, again using the same information that we did previously. Okay, so now we're going to use this information to find our break-even point. Okay, just quickly before we do that, what is the break-even point? Okay, break-even point, sales level at which operating income is zero. Okay, so you are just covering your fixed and variable expenses, and you are not providing an operating profit. If you have sales above that, then you have a profit. Sales below that, then you're going to have a loss because you're not able to cover all those fixed expenses. Okay, so let's take a look at this problem here now. What is coming up? Okay, units to be sold. We have our fixed expenses plus our operating income divided by our contribution margin per unit. Okay, we have 210,000 as our fixed expenses. Again, we're setting this to zero because we want to see what is our break-even point, that point which there is zero operating income, divided by our contribution margin per unit. Okay, so we know that we want to sell 7,000 passengers. If we sell 7,000 passengers with the contribution margin per unit of $30, we will have an operating income of zero. Obviously, if we want to earn a operating income of, say, $5,000, then we can calculate that in there as well by putting that into this formula right here. Okay, sales revenue. Now we know 7,000 passengers. What is the sales revenue needed? Well, we know that the selling price per ticket is $50 per ticket. Therefore, our sales revenue needed to break even, 7,000 times 50 is $350,000. We can also calculate that by using our contribution margin ratio. I'm sorry, I don't know why this keeps coming up. Divided by our contribution margin ratio, and we can get the same number that way as well. Okay, graphing, you can graph those CVP relationships. I don't really have a problem to go through on that, but there is information, of course, in your textbook there. Objective 3. We can perform sensitivity analysis in response to changing business conditions. Objective 4. Find the break-even and target profit volumes for multi-product companies. Okay, so let's go through an example of that. That is S7-9. Okay, so once again, we're going to use some of the same data sets that we had before, same set of information. This time we have two different cruises. We have a regular cruise and we have an executive cruise. The price per ticket for the regular is $50, but notice our executive cruise has a much higher price point, and the variable cost per passenger are only $40. So obviously we have a contribution margin that's much higher for our executive cruise. Now what are they asking us? They want to know, assuming this, is it higher or lower than a simple average contribution margin, our weighted average? Why? And will this new sales mix cause their break-even point to increase or decrease? Okay, so we're going to take a look at both of these with the sales mix of two different products here. Okay, we have to make some assumptions. We're going to expect here that they're going to sell 4 of the regular cruises for every 1 executive cruise. Now we can compute our weighted average contribution margin. Okay, so we know the sales price, we know our variable costs. We can calculate our contribution margin. We already knew our regular was $30, but now we can calculate our executive at $90. And our sales mix, 4 regular for every 1 executive. Now to get our total contribution margin weighted average, we're going to take the total, the 210, and divide it by the total number of, here it is right here, the 210 divided by 5 to get our weighted average contribution margin, okay, per unit, $42. Now, we can use this to answer our next questions here. Compute the total number that they will need to sell in order to break even. Okay, break even sales of regular cruises. Well, we know our fixed costs, again, 210. We know our break even. Of course, we want to have 0 in operating income. Now we're going to use our weighted average contribution margin that we just calculated on the prior slide. So how many tickets do we need to sell total? We need to sell 5,000 total. But remember, of those 5,000, 4 out of 5 are going to be regular and 1 out of 5 are going to be the executive. So multiply by 5,000 tickets by 4/5 and by 1/5 to get the total number of tickets you'll need to sell for each one for those total cruise passengers of 5,000. Then we can take this information here and calculate our total sales numbers by going back and multiplying that. We didn't do this in this problem, that wasn't part of the question, but I can take that, the 4,000 cruises of the regular, multiply that by the information sales price of 50. I can multiply the 1,000 tickets by the sales price of 130 and get my total sales value for that. This one is giving you the multi-product firms. It's another example that you can work through on your own. I believe that is the most of the chapter. Obviously, there is one more objective margin of safety that has some examples that you can work through as well. Pretty straightforward. If you have any additional questions on this chapter, as always, please let me know. I hope some of these short video summaries are helpful for you. Thanks and have a good weekend.